Why would you want to use watercolor with gouache? It seems strange because they really look alike, but let me give you some good reasons to do it. I think the main difference between gouache and watercolor, besides opacity, of course, is the size of the pigments. It looks like watercolor pigments are fusing inside the paper, and pigments from gouache are sitting on top of the paper, so they are very easy to reactivate. Unlike watercolor pigments that are really stuck inside the paper. So when you paint a layer on top of watercolor or on top of gouache, it doesn't behave the same. I want to show you that because so far I'm not sure you are with me. So I'm placing a blob of pink watercolor and I will do the same with gouache. So to be fair, I will be using a very liquid mix with my gouache. So it's supposed to behave the same. So I'm not talking about the color by itself, the luminosity and etc. It's just a test. Here is my point. I will be adding a layer of gouache on top of the two and a contrasting color. And I'm applying with a single brush stroke. On top of watercolor, on top of gouache. And let's do this with the same mix, but rubbing a bit the paper. 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5, 6. And can you see how you are lifting the pigments from below and not here? This is really great. As I said, watercolor pigments are stuck inside the paper and you can rub a long time before you lift the color. Of course, you can still lift a bit of the pigment, but so much less than with gouache. And this is really interesting when you want to layer and have a certain amount of layers going from thin to thick. This is really cool if you use watercolor in the background. So first good reason to use watercolor and gouache and not using gouache as watercolor. This is not the same thing. Please get the right consistency when you need it. And gouache is best when it's creamy. If you want to know more about gouache consistency, you have a video that I link above where I talk about the do's and don'ts of gouache consistency. Right, let's go back to our mix of gouache and watercolor. What you can do also with watercolor and gouache, and this is really cool, is take watercolor, so it's transparent, it's great, and add a tiny bit of white gouache inside. And this will give a slightly opaque mix. That is almost the same as gouache, but as I have shown you before, the pigment will stay inside the paper. So you can have a first layer in the background with watercolor, a second layer with watercolor and a bit of white inside, and then you can go with gouache. And you can add, I would say, 3 layers of gouache on top of this, so it makes a total of 5 layers. If you like to paint in layers, this is for you. Now, it was just a small test. I want to show you how it behaves in an actual painting where I will be mixing watercolor and gouache. I'm working in a hot-pressed watercolor sketchbook. It's A4 size with a hard binding. I love it because it's really sturdy and you can paint with a lot of water on the pages. And if you want to get the same sketchbook, you have a link in the description below the video. First, I want to make some blobs and splotches of watercolor. This is not really accurate, botanical. It's just playing, having fun and placing colors on the paper. Because this is just what we want right now. We want to have fun and express ourselves with our paintings. Place light colors like flower colors and have the blobs touch each other. Or not, it depends on your taste. And I'm not really thinking about something specific, just placing some splotches of colors here and there, having fun with the tip of my brush and dipping inside the color directly in my palette. And if you want to know how to set up your watercolor palette, I have a video just for you. It's linked on top of the screen right now and in the description box under the video. Grab some green, or if you don't have some, make a mix of blue and yellow, and you can place kind of leaf shapes, but it's really rough. And I have my blobs of greens touching the other colors, so it's bleeding into each other and making some random colors that I love. Look how gorgeous this is. If you've been this far in the video, it's time for you to boot the like button. It really helps the video to spread. Thank you. Merci. Now, I want to be a bit more specific and paint some kind of roses. And roses are not really difficult. This is a spiral. Just think of leaving some white space behind the petals. Anyway, this is just a background as we will be painting with gouache on top of the watercolor. Here I'm just blurring a bit the edges by dipping my brush in the clean water. So it gives kind of a different style with hard and soft edges. And you can vary the color inside a single rose by dipping your brush in a darker color or slightly different color, so it gives kind of a shadow already. For the leaves, use a soft round brush with enough water inside and apply the tip of the brush on the paper, press hard and lift until you get the point edge. And you can make a double leaf, so to speak, with two shapes close to each other that can touch or not, with leaving just a little bit of white inside. It gives something really interesting. What you can do also is vary the amount of pigments in your water, and you can have very dark and very light flowers and leaves. Once you have placed your main leaves, you can add some fillers, and this is just some random brush strokes, very thin, to give like branches and some little leaves going here and there. This is just to balance a bit the composition. First layer of watercolor is done. Just let it dry to the bone. And then you can use gouache. I'm using Himi gouache because I am really trying hard to love it. The point here is to refine the petals of the flowers without erasing everything from the watercolor background. So go with something slightly liquid with your gouache mix and go on top of the existing color and define more the petals. I'm using an angled brush, which is just perfect for making petals and leaves. And if you want to know more about my favorite gouache brushes, I have a video just for you that is linked on top of it. And everything doesn't have to be a rose, it can be any kind of flower you want. As I said before, it's not botanical accurate and I don't care about it. It's just the idea of flower. If you really want to feel the difference between watercolor and gouache, you need to go thick with your mix, and inside your mix you can have different colors. This is really cool because when you are pressing on the brush, different colors are coming outside of the brush, giving some nice variations in the color. You will have to believe me on this, or get your own brush and paper and do it yourself, because applying gouache on an existing layer of watercolor is really smoother than applying on the bare paper, so to speak. I don't know how to explain this. Maybe it's like if the gouache had something to grab on it, to stick to it, and really it's something you have to feel by yourself. Let me know in comments if you test this and if you feel the same than I do. Once you're almost done, it's time to take a step back and look at the composition from a distance and see where you miss some dark, some light. It's time to balance the contrast. This is what I'm doing right now with a very dark green something. It's kind of leaf, but it's also meant to have the flowers pop up on the page. Second layer of gouache, and this time I'm using a very fine round brush so I can add more details, more lines. Decide where the light is coming from and where are supposed to be the shadows, and this is the part I am painting with the dark gouache. Actually, this is kind of a liquid mix because I like having something a bit more liquid when it comes to making fine lines with a round brush. I feel like I need more fillers, so just a random color and some random shapes, making some dots, I don't know what it's supposed to be. It's just to add more dynamism to my composition because I feel it's a bit too stiff. Let's go with even more liquid and make some dripping. Dripping is life, it's so fun to do. Just take a scrap of paper to protect your painting when you don't want to have some dripping on it. So are you convinced now? Are you using watercolor under your wash painting from now? Let me know in comments if you are doing it.